Alrighty, welcome back to another devlog. This is number 64. Alright, so on Monday it was all about continuing to work with the AI. I had a bunch of issues still from last week that were not quite working correctly. Just the algorithm to actually detect, to set properly whether your state is detected or not based on the number of AIs that have spotted you and whatnot. I had to go back and get that right. So there was also still issues where my bullets were not penetrating through the first layer of the the collider when they aim at you. They were not able to get through there, so I had to go and figure out with like raycasts and also mess around with the colliders and the layers and stuff in order to make sure that the bullet can actually pass right through and ignore that first. So the player will actually stop on that collider, but the actual bullets will pass through. And so I had to implement and test some logic to do that, but eventually I got it fixed. There's still some more issues with the behavior, AI behavior. Like so I was testing out things like when they're chasing you now. Like with my recent changes and fixes, there is actually no functionality to prevent them from spotting you through obstacles. So the first day of Monday, I really went back and did a lot more testing until it really started to look good, and I couldn't really see any problems. I pretty much ironed out the last of the AI problems from last week, and now let's see here. Let's do this here. So what we have here now, I can actually aim, if you see. Well, it's kind of hard hard to see because so much crap is going on. Like, all these feedbacks are going off and they're really dogpiling me now. But essentially, if I can demo this, my aim actually penetrates the first shield and it accurately hits their enemy collider without being blocked. Um, and also just like the proper ray cast, so it's not ray casting to the first collider, it's actually ray casting to their body collider. So adjusting things like aim and stuff, um, yeah, like I said, um, as soon as I ironed out the rest of the AI issues, I couldn't really see anything. The only other issue that I'm going to work on later is the actual chasing, where they have a tendency to kind of pile up a little bit. I kind of want to make them, if they stop, they kind of naturally strafe and spread out a little bit. Um, I did fix an issue if you look at the nav mesh. Now that what was happening before, like if you were going around a corner and one was stopping at a corner, um, the rest of the AIs could get caught on that enemy because they can't pass through each other. Now I have made like a cutout for them, so if they're stationary, then the nav mesh will cut out, and then all the other AIs will have to route navigation around them and so forth. I was also having a problem with cover that if you were in cover, oop, what happened there? If you were in cover and there happened to be an AI, just say you wanted a round cover, and there happened to be an AI in front of you, if you did a round cover, I made it so that if your input is locked, it'll pass right through it'll allow you to pass through the enemy colliders without blocking you and pretty much soft blocking the game. So that was one case I spotted. But yeah, enemies don't get caught up on each other anymore around corners. So yeah, just ironing out the last of the AI issues, and it's pretty stable for now. I can't really spot any major issues anymore when it comes to the actual AI logic. So it's actually pretty solid now. So I kind of moved over to some feedbacks. As you can see here, um, I juiced up the feedbacks a little bit. Now, when you're getting hit, there's like this red vignette. I think I had that before. Um, there's also like a shield. If your shield goes down, I made it. There was actually something with the original shield logic where even if you were getting hit, the actual timer for the shield recharge was still going, and the shield would go up anyway. I wanted to make sure that if you get hit while the shield is charging, the timer actually resets. But if the shield goes down, you see a little bit of a. It's kind of hard to spot with all the other feedbacks going on, but um, yeah, I made like a chromatic aberration feedback. You can see it kind of shifts a little bit, and it really. So when I go, let's just say, let's turn that immortal health off. When it goes to the next stage, now the next stage is really intense, and it's, you know, and now I have this two-layer blood vignette where it's like you can really see that um, you're really taking a lot of damage. You got to get out soon. And then, um, so that was Monday. On Tuesday, okay, so on Tuesday, what I did was I made sure to implement this case where, um, let's just say I killed one of these, and um, I killed one of these enemies, and let's just say I I exited the sector or whatever, Anyways, there it goes. The door is open, and we'll exit the sector. The actual enemy will be cleaned up and removed. Now, how do I, let's just say I'm doing my thing, and then I actually, the player actually dies. Okay, so dies, resets. How does it, the issue is I have to build a system to actually respawn a new enemy prefab and set all its proper data, its position, in its place, because the original prefab is destroyed. So that's what I was taking care of on Tuesday, making sure that works correctly. And there's other issues surrounding when I return to the game, particularly with the door. Just spotting tons of issues. Yeah, spotting a lot of issues. It's always funny when I give these demos. There's always, yeah, I'm always seeing additional issues I haven't spotted in all my work and testing, so I have to go back next week and fix those first thing. Anyways, when you die, one of the issues I was seeing was when you're respawning, the actual door was acting improperly when you place the position here. It was kind of partially open. It was getting confused with the counts or whatever it was, but I had to make sure that on the start it would be closed, and then at a certain point it would so it just worked properly. So I kind of had to go to the door controller and kind of refactor a little bit, make it. There's a couple prototype functionality that I wasn't really using right now, but I kind of beefed up the door controller to make it kind of handle this case where you're respawning inside of the collider and it'll kind of not freak out and the animator will act properly in all conditions. So little work on there, got it sorted out. And then the last thing on Tuesday that I took care of was basically I had some sort of blood cleanup on death, but I actually implemented a better solution because now there's blood on the enemy. So if you respawn, I make sure that pretty much all the blood is cleaned up. There's no leftover blood. My goal is to reset the game state pretty much to where it was when you first started the checkpoint. And so cleaning up the blood properly, but just by tagging all the prefabs with tags and then cleaning up the rest of the particles manually like I usually do. So on Wednesday, I was working on alerting what's the sound functionality. So basically now, if you're crouching, there's no actual sound invocation. You can't hear a footstep, and also, so I put like a sphere radius to kind of raycast the sphere, and if you all of a sudden stand up and start running like that, they'll hear you and come running. And also for shooting as well. So if you, let's just say, this is kind of the same thing. You pull out your gun and you just, boom, there's a radius and it alerts and everybody gets alerted. So sound alert on footsteps and shooting functionality is working. That wasn't too bad. Like I was saying before, when you're alerted in this alert state, now I implemented functionality to where and this is just the first step in like the dynamic game testing. One of my solutions is like, okay, so it's not too easy. Like if you get spotted, you're trying to sneak your way through this sector, and you get spotted, all of a sudden the sector pretty much locks down. The doors are locked. So I had to figure out a way to actually collect all the doors that are associated and linked to this sector and lock them down. So pretty much you're trapped in here with these guys, and that kind of prevents you from, if you're trying to sneak through, just cheesing it. Like if you get spotted, just outrun them, and then run through the door, and then run away eventually. There has to be a lot more balancing going on, like um, and that's whole gameplay testing. But this is the piece of functionality where it's like it just kind of prevents you from simply breaking the game by just running past all the enemies. So um, that's just one of the things. The other thing is like maybe you slow down eventually, you lose stamina, a lot of things. So there's throwing a lot of ideas around, but I think this building the locking the doors, and that's part of refactoring the door controller, like being able to lock the doors on command. When you're alerted, if you're inside the collider, it'll like force close the door even though you're inside. So additional functionality on the door controller. And that's going to go away to another tool in order to like balance out the game difficulty from too easy to too hard. But one of the last things I did on Wednesday, I figured out there was in vector functionality to actually implement animations on as you can see, like when you get hit, there's to take like to animations to do, like when you receive a projectile damage, you can actually play the animation to have this like recoil, right? And it took some doing, but I figured out, like, depending on where you're facing. So if you're getting hit from the back, you move forward. If you're getting front or the side. So I just had to hook up all that functionality with my systems and vectors, kind of buried functionality, but it actually works pretty good. And then I took the next step of the same thing with the enemies. If you shoot the enemies, they apply their own um, hit recoil animations as well. So on Thursday, I was trying to. I think from. I think I on Wednesday I was messing around with adding sound effects for when you actually I shoot at the enemy or they shoot at me and I take a hit, right? So it's like hit damage sound effects, right? I had some sound effects last week for when you kill the enemy. He has a death scream animation or whatever. That's great. But I expanded it to, okay, when you take a hit or your enemy takes a hit, you have like a sound effect, right? So like you can hear um, and it doesn't happen each time either. I had to implement like a system where like a timer. So like you get hit and then if it's within the like a 3-second timer, it won't go off again. So every time you get hit, it's not gonna do a sound effects emote. Same thing with the enemy the enemy AI. So pretty much in parity. Um, the thing was, I was messing around with voice mod to do more sound effects, and I was able to do the same thing with the enemies, like use my own voice and do a voice changer for the enemies, and that worked pretty good. I was able to do um, some. Let's see if I can. Yeah, I was able to do a whole set of random, kind of like the footsteps it shoots off, or kind of like the firing. It has a set of firing animations, so it doesn't all sound the same. It kind of chooses a random one, and it gives that dynamicism. So there's a whole random set of like 8 or 10 injured sound effects animations, and then I added some more death animations for the enemies. So there's about 5 of them to choose from. It picks at random, and that's all through Fmod. But I kind of did the same thing for the character initially at first. I went through the voice changer. I found a female voice, and I tried to do the same thing for injured and death animations, but I found that it didn't really work as well for this character. The voice changer, it sounds good for like an alien enemy or whatever, but for like a character, it really, for the main character, it really wasn't fitting in my opinion. Like the voice changer would kind of do like a, you can kind of, when you're changing tone, it really loses a lot of, it loses a lot of fidelity and tone and all that. It just doesn't sound natural for like the main character. So, um, I kind of, I was messing around with that. It didn't sound really great, so I kind of scrapped that. I had, what I had was I had bought a sound effects pack on sale or whatever for bundle, and it had a nice package of voiceover um, voiceover clips that I could use, and everything from just basic, non-word voiceover lines like taking damage, death voiceover sound effects, and it 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 sounds a lot more. It sounds because it's voiced by an actual female, right? So it's actually sounds like female voice, right? Not some dude like me trying to use a voice changer to try to pitch it up for a female. It didn't work. So um, in my opinion, it's a lot better. The only problem is you can't do all these custom lines. So my plan is to use what I have and whatever voice line I can use for that. It's still in the works, but I think this works good for much better for just like the injured animation and um, or injured sound effects and the death sound effects uh, because it's kind of language agnostic. It's not really saying any words in any particular language. When it gets to like dialogue, that's a different story and that's more to think about. But right now, that's what I'm going with. No voice changer, but I wanted to the actual voice recordings. They're very base and they're very. What I mean by that is they don't have any dynamic effects on them. So let's just say if I just played the sound effect as it was, it would sound like you're in a padded room. She's in a padded room and it sounds very flat, right? Um, Same thing with all the other sound effects that I've noticed so far, and I wanted to have a way to kind of um, address that because let's just say you have a death animation and you're in a wide open cavern, right? If you have like a flat voice line, dying, and there's no like reverberation, there's no echo, that doesn't really make sense, right? There's no. So what I had to go and do is figure out with Fmod is that what you can do, which is pretty much the reason I'm using Fmod, is you can do a lot of different things with the mixer, the sound mixer. So let's just say this room is like really echoey, like, or this hallway is really, really soundproof and stuffy. Like, if you're in this hallway, you can adjust the reverb dynamically depending on where you are in the sector, going through triggers, and you at certain points you can trigger that, that fade over to a different zone, and you can define these things. So I wanted the appropriate level of reverb, especially just in this room. So what they have is like snapshots. It's pretty much like the same thing as instance, but you set it up in Fmod where, it's pretty much like an override of the default mixer settings where you can add additional effects on top of it. So what I've done is I've applied this snapshot, and it pretty much applies to all sound effects on that level of the mixer channel. So that means now like shots and you know uh, injured sound effects or death, they all have this slight. It's not overpowering, but I tested and it works. It's kind of it's there, but it doesn't sound flat at all like a bass sound effect. It has some sort of uh, reverb applied to it, which gives the effect that the sound is bouncing off the walls or whatever. So, and it's part of another reason where I have to move the footsteps from Invector to my Fmon system, because all the other sounds work great with this reverb applied to it, but if you notice, the sound effects for the footsteps are still, they have no reverb applied, so they still sound very flat when you're walking around, and they should have a little bit of an echo to them or whatever, depending on what kind of environment you're in. So I have to do that, but I figured out how to do that, and that'll be a good tool for just different environments that you're in. So it's like, smaller rooms versus larger rooms. How does the sound actually how do the sound effects actually dynamically change? So figuring that out was a big thing, and it was pretty much good. And then I went through with my other sound effects and applied just applied a I didn't really hear it that time, but just applied a yeah, that when you hit the ground, there's a like a thud or whatever. You fall to the floor. So little details like that. So with that, I was pretty much done with like this epic leg of adding and making sure that the enemy AI is working good in like the room and with multiple enemies, and that whole thing is pretty much wrapped up, where the last thing I added for now is kind of a feedback on spotted. So one of the things I wanted to give some sort of feedback that when the player is spotting you, to kind of give them, like, there's a 2-second window, but you can see that, well, I can feel that the controller is starting to ramp up over time its haptic intensity until you're spotted. But there's also a visual where there's like a vignette of a light yellow color. I kind of went with light yellow. I couldn't choose what color to use, but it kind of gives like a visual that you're actually being detected. You should probably get out of there. And if you don't, you just go to the alerted state and they chase after you. So that was one of the last things I did. I pushed all my work to main, and we're ready to start a new epic leg, right? And I kind of had to decide where I want to go from here. Do I want to switch over? So I kind of had to put on my project management hat and was like, where, we got that big epic leg wrapped up. What's the next step? So I was either between working on getting all the levels of this level into production ready, like from room to room, or I could go implement what I put off before, which is the dialogue system. I had roughly covered the documentation last week or something, kind of grazed the surface. There's kind of a lot to it, but I chose to do the dialogue system next. On Friday, I got started with that, and I made some good progress. And basically, I set up a couple things. I was going through the step-by-step getting started, how to set up the actual dialogue system, creating the database, hooking things up, and I got pretty far. I was able to figure out how to do barks. I put a little NPC robot here. This is going to be uh, my little robot companion that kind of follows me around and open doors and stuff. He's kind of a happy little guy. So basically, I figured out how to make him, just randomly say stuff, but I had to, yes, he has a little default UI text bubble or whatever. And that's one component. So, NPCs can actually emote text and stuff. Um, the other component is actually the conversation interaction, where now I have this dialogue interaction, and I let's just open the dialogue editor. You have to work with this dialogue editor to pretty much describe um, like the conversations and stuff. Yeah, so, and it's like a graph. So basically, NPC from NPC back to the player conversation, and it just took a lot of doing to figure out how to actually work all this and how to actually, what all this new system is. Just like everything else, working with a new package. The problem with new packages, they have it's like an all-around solution, and that provides most of the functionality you need, but there's a lot of functionality you don't need or not going to use. But it's kind of a really complex system, and the trade-off is like you don't have to implement it yourself, but the trade-off is you have to kind of slowly digest a huge system and figure out how it works and how to use it the way you want to use it. So it is what it is, and I made pretty far progress. What really threw me though on Friday, I was just trying to have a basic, you click on the NPC and it fires off this UI, and I just wanted to have I just wanted to have the UI just, the NPC says something and then you hit a continue button, then I say something, continue, just back and forth. But the default setup was, if the player responds, it would show this other UI, and you'd have, you'd have to choose a response. This is okay if you want to have choosing response in your dialogue, and then have a lot of dynamic things based off your response. But I just wanted to get a simple thing going where I could just input a bunch of text, back and forth conversation, like a simple dialogue. And in order to do that, I had to really dive in under the hood in order to figure out, why is it just, for a player, why does it just make me use this response all the time? I just want to do subtitle to subtitle. And it was a real slog getting through there. But after a lot of debugging and testing and figuring out, it really boiled down to this one. There's like 100 different options, and I don't know any what any of these do, but it really, the real thing was that there's two things. And here you had to actually put this auto tag first to kind of signal the system, okay, this is player, but this is automatic. Just use this, the regular text panel. Don't use the response panel. And the second thing is you have to tick this. You have to tick this particular option here, show PC subtitles during line, which doesn't mean anything off the surface, but when you're digging through the code, and the actual system behind this is pretty gnarly, and actually, but that's what I do as system programmer. It's like I have to kind of go in there and walk through the actual logic to see how it's actually behaving, to actually finally come to the little option, and you click this and it does what you do. So that was Friday, and that was a real pain, but that's a milestone. Now I can actually use it on a, like a dialogue system on a basic level. At the end of the day, I took the next step of actually, because I have to now begin taking this basic UI here and converting it to my own custom UI, because this looks like garbage. It's not right. So I have to I kind of have to take elements from my professional UI package and kind of patch together a good looking UI from this, right? So I was doing that on Friday, but like my power went out again, the computer shut down, I lost my state, and so I lost a little bit of work. That happens very often. Every time I rev up the microwave, I have to put the computer to sleep, otherwise the power cuts out. This time it was the vacuum cleaner. I had a vacuum cleaner and the heater on, and I turned on the vacuum cleaner and I cut my project. So I'm constantly always having to, reset my clocks every time the circuit board fails at my house. So it's just one of those annoying things. But I had this UI looking somewhat decent, um, but I lost some work. But that's what I'll be working on next week. Getting the UI looking pretty good, so I can have some sort of basic dialogue. Working with interactions. So instead of using the mouse to fire off an interaction, making sure that the controller can actually set off a input interaction, so that I have a basic sort of I'll have some sort of basic dialogue system functionality that so I can actually, it's like a vehicle for like a narrative in the game. So there's UI, and then also I have to figure out how to do kind of record like a animated portrait of my character. I'm not talking about like mouth movements, like mouth, for the words and stuff, but just basically like instead of a static image of the character, just kind of like record like a idle loop and play it as as a portrait. Same thing with whoever the NPC is, the conversation. Um, Kind of do that same thing. So it'll be a little nicer than just a static image or whatever, but it'll have like a pre-recorded graphical rendering for the portrait. So that's the work that's going to be done next week. One other thing I wanted to discuss before I left was one of the problems I was kind of running into before. Um, so I added a new package, and I finally realized the problem I was having. I have a lot of different tools and to be able to kind of expedite my day-to-day development to kind of so like for example, I have for the hierarchy, I have the ability to kind of drag objects and kind of depending on what what I'm working on, the relevant objects, I can easily and quickly switch between them. And also the same thing with if I'm working between multiple folders, I can actually drag out different bookmark tabs and switch between them. Like it just helps with like development efficiency, so I don't have to kind of jump back and forth between folders, or I figured this out a long time ago, or jump, try to figure out, okay, I keep jumping back and forth, clicking and losing my place. One of the problems though is this menu system up here. It's kind of grown out of control and disorderly, and it finally, like the new package, each package likes to place its own definitions for its menu system. Some place it in tools, and then some place it in windows, and they place it all over the place. So um, every time I want to go and switch to something, I always kind of have to figure out where it was. There's just too many paths to memorize. Like for example, I wanna add another sector or something. Like okay, where is it? Sector. There's no sector there. It's like each time, like a couple minutes or two, it's like, where's sector? Oh yeah, that's right. It's actually hiding under procedural worlds, which is the company name. I keep forgetting that. And okay, it's this 5 levels down. That's actually create portal, right? So this would always happen, and then these main tools, like it always become harder and harder to find, and I'd have to like kind of figure out where it was and go to the documentation. Oh, it's fmod, this particular path. So instead of doing that, I went in to the package and I actually cleaned up this top level. I modified the third-party package like I did before to clean up this top level because it like and sort of like move things like fmod that its own had its own root menu into like tools. So I dumped everything in tools, cleaned this top level up, and made my own root level menu system. And this kind of acts as like a quick link system. So I have my own custom stuff right at the top, reserved at index 0, and then I have these sections, which is intending for like an alphabetized organization. So, and this will be like kind of named whatever naturally I think of. So instead of, if I wanted to open a sector portal, I can make a quick link to just say menu, go down to S, sector, open portal. Or if I wanted to do animation, like, oh, I need to open up the animation windows instead of, I know where the animation windows in window is. Pretty, it's pretty easy to find that. That's pretty easy. But instead, I can just go to my thing and say animation, because I'm always doing this pretty frequently. So anything that I'm doing like real frequently, and I don't have to dig through 15 levels or multiple menus to figure out exactly what I could just like identify and build this menu along the way, alphabetized to kind of like bookmark the things that I use all the time, right? So this will grow over time, but it's a system that kind of alphabetizes these quick link commands to open windows or execute some sort of functionality that is kind of buried in these third-party definitions wherever they happen to be. So I can have some sort of like quick link that I use all the time to maybe, I don't know, do a pro builder or just make a basic cube or something, whatever I need to do. So that's kind of what wanted to show there. Pretty much wraps up the week, and yeah, we'll cut it here, and we will talk to y'all later. See ya.